Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Nero and I said last week that I would make an A2 resource video this week because last week I did resources for A0 and A1. So here I am today with my A2 video. I can warn, or I guess I can reassure all of you that today's video is not going to be as long as last week's video. I know it was probably kind of hard to get through. But yeah, there's simply not as many things to mention for A2, so it should be shorter. I also promise that I'm not going to rant as much and I will try to be a bit more concise. When you're speaking to a camera for the very first time, you kind of lose all sense of how long have I been talking? Has it been minutes, hours, weeks, years? And I just kind of lost myself on that, so it ended up being a lot. And I'm also kind of doing the same thing right now, so I'm gonna try not do that. I'm so sorry. Without further ado, let's get right into it. I'm going to be starting with vocabulary again. Nothing has really changed since the A1 video, because I'm gonna be recommending you pretty much the same thing. I think you should try and get through all the memorized courses, which is kind of hypocritical because I did not finish all of them. I only did like 4 or 5 and then I switched to my own Anki deck full time. And that's going to be the second point. You should definitely start making your own Anki deck. Whenever you're reading something and you come across a word that you don't know, you should just add it to your deck. It doesn't have to be Anki. I mentioned this last time, I just really like Anki. It can be Quizlet, or you can make your own deck on Memrise, or you can even write physical flashcards. Just make sure that if you find a word that you don't know, you look it up and you add it to your deck. Especially if you're reading texts that are interesting to you, that have something to do with your hobbies or interests, your passions, then you should definitely try to learn those words that you come across. And that's kind of the biggest advice that I can give you when it comes to vocabulary. Number 2 is going to be reading. So, I mentioned link last week. I said link you last week, but then I found out that it's pronounced link. So, sorry, Steve Kaufman. It is link. I can definitely recommend that. I've been using Link every single day, and they have, again, text for all kinds of levels. Also, if you have a paid membership, I feel so bad. I'm trying to only really recommend things that are free or cheap, but this is a paid subscription. But still, I think it's really useful. You can import your own text and articles and look up words on the fly and export them to Anki, and it's just pretty handy. Also, last week, and I will say this right now, I'm gonna recommend you some things that I also mentioned in my other video, but I will not be mentioning these in my B1 video because that's where I kind of draw the line. But yes, last week I mentioned for reading the website Paruski, and I'm gonna mention it again because they have texts for, I think, A1, A2, and B1-ish. Not many texts, but some, so you should check that out. However, oh my god, I'm actually excited. This is gonna be my biggest recommendation when it comes to reading and learning vocabulary also. It is this book. Seriously, I read this when I was kind of on the verge between A1 and A2, I think, and it was a pretty good read for that level, honestly. I don't know, there's a lot that can be said about this, and I think because it is not written by a native speaker, some of these sentences are not perfectly natural. I asked someone about that, so that's kind of a bit of a thing to keep in mind. Also, one thing that this book does really well is that they mark the stress in every single word, so that when you try to read out loud or you just kind of see a word that you don't know yet, you know where the stress is and you can pronounce it better. However, I have noticed that in some words the stress is not marked correctly. I've only noticed it in a few words, so the overwhelming majority is perfectly fine. Just that is something to keep in mind. So what this book does really well is that it has multiple stories, I think 4 or 5, and they're all divided into like 3-ish chapters. And at the end of every chapter, there are a few words that were mentioned in the text that you may not know yet, and they translate that. They don't have any sort of annotations on the side or anything. And there are a few comprehension questions that you can answer at the end of every chapter. You can kind of test yourself to see if you really understood the story. And all of these stories kind of have a different genre. So it's definitely, I don't know, a lot more interesting than just reading about exchange students in every single like textbook ever. I think that's like the usual textbook shtick. So yeah, this is a lot more interesting than your usual textbook material. And I think if you finish this book, you will have a real sense of accomplishment, because I had, and it kind of set me up for more reading, and I really enjoyed reading. I can really thank these two guys for this book, and I want to try out the other ones that they have written for other languages as well. And one more thing that is a little bit more odd, I guess you could say, a bit more, well, it might be really hard for other people to get their hands on this if they're not from Russia or any of the like countries close to Russia, I suppose. But I came across this book kind of by accident. I got it secondhand. You can see it's really like old and weathered, and the condition is not that good anymore, but I don't care. This was pretty amazing for me, honestly. This is a little book with, I think, 6 stories by 2 Russian authors. They're short stories. It's a bilingual text. I want to show you an example. So you will find Russian text and English text. And I read through this book. It was kind of a bit of a harder read for A2, I guess. There were a lot more words that I didn't know, but I could instantly just look over at the English text and then I could understand what the Russian text was trying to tell me. I also noticed some very funky translations, but in general, I think this is really amazing. And actually I lied, because I am going to mention this in my B1 video because of the actual exercises that are in here, because it's all about verbs. And verbs are, for me, the hardest thing in the Russian language. So, for reading, A2, I can recommend this. I will try and find a link to see if you can buy this anywhere. I hope you can. If not, I am very sorry, but this is just, it was an interesting experience. One last thing. There is a website called Boost Your Russian. I mentioned the website founder's YouTube channel last week, but she also has a website, and she is giving away a graded reader for pre-intermediate level, which is A2 really, and it's for Jules Verne's in Around the World in 80 Days, I think, something like that, and it's like 50 pages for free. I read that as it was, I think, the first thing I read in Russian. It was very like, it felt very good to be done with it at the end, and I do think it was useful and beneficial. And if you have no other reading material, go read that book. Honestly, I think it was a very entertaining read. I'd never read that book in English before, so I did not, well, I kind of knew what it was about, but I hadn't read it, and I really liked it. So, it is obviously, it is much easier than the original book, and is a lot shorter, pretty condensed, but I think it was a good read, and it's free, so try it out. I'll link it down below, and yeah, you just have to sign up for a newsletter. That's all you're gonna do. Alright, so much for reading. Let's move on to the next point. Alright, so for listening, I only have 2 recommendations this time. One is the podcast Russian with Max by also YouTuber Russian with Max. And it is, I think, perfect for A2. Some of the later episodes maybe for B1 also, but I listened to the first episode many months ago. I think it was in April, and I was shocked. I had understood everything. The whole 20-minute episode. I was feeling so happy, and I hope that all of you can also feel this kind of just intense feeling of happiness and accomplishment. So definitely go check that out. And also a podcast called Очень по-русски, which is the episodes are really short, like 3 or 4 minutes, and they are completely transcribed, so you can look at all of the stuff that they're saying, see every single word, with, I think they even mark the stress on the transcript. But yeah, I will also link that down below. That was it pretty much for listening for right now, but I'm also gonna talk about media and YouTube later, so. Alright. Now we're gonna come to another interesting area, textbooks and grammar, just like in last week's video. Today I will be showing you, well, 2 things, but I'll also be mentioning a few other things. First of all, in last week's video, I mentioned Teach Yourself Russian and the new Penguin Russian course that both of them I do not like very much, but if you're into that teaching style, they also cover A2, of course, so you can check that out. You can probably find both of these for free online somewhere, and you can just check them out to see if you think they're going to be useful for you and then use them or not. It's up to you. But besides that, I will also mention the same websites as last time, which was, I think, RussianLessons.net, MasterRussian.com, LearnRussianStepByStep.com, and I have to check real quick, RussianLearn.com. I hope I didn't mention that just now. If yes, I'm very sorry. So yeah, that was it from the last week's stuff, so let's move on to what I wanted to mention this week. First of all, oh god, as well, some of you may know, if you follow my Twitter, I'm currently preparing for the B1 exam, although I've recently been thinking about taking the B2 exam instead. But anyway, I've been preparing for the B1 exam, partly with this book. It is for the A1, A2, and B1 levels of the Russian language test, and it basically has vocabulary and grammar questions that you have to answer, and kind of just, it prepares you for one part of the text, which is where you have to answer grammar and vocabulary questions. Who would have thought? So I think this was really useful because it kind of reinforces the rules that you've already learned, and what I tried to do was I wanted to get an intuitive feeling for what sentence would be correct. So I tried to read through the sentence, look at the answers, and I tried to think of the sentence in my head and just not think about rules. Just be like, this sounds right, and then this sounds right, and this sounds right. So I was just trying to really get like a good intuition, and I think for that it is super useful because you kind of see similar sentence structures a lot, and you have questions about imperfective and perfective verbs and all that kind of stuff. I really like it. I'm not sure if it's available outside of Russia, or at least like cheap outside of Russia, because I think I paid 500 rubles for it in Moscow. And I'm also planning on getting the B2 and C1, and I think there's even C2 versions next time I am in Moscow, which hopefully will be at the end of this year. And another thing is Russian Tutor by the same publisher that does the Teach Yourself courses. I have mixed feelings about this book because on one hand, I like the format, but on the other hand, I think they really don't have a good idea of kind of what level they are expecting the user of this book to be. Because, this book says it's for advanced beginner to upper intermediate. So what they're saying, it's from A2 to B2. I beg to disagree. So first of all, what I think this book does wrong, it is that it kind of, it has a CEFR rating for every chapter. And so, for example, the first chapter is rating A1 to B2. That is a very, very broad range. That's literally from not knowing anything to being conversationally fluent. And so this is kind of the problem that I see in this book. It starts off every chapter with grammar explanations. So, for example, in chapter In chapter 4, it starts off with explanations about how to form adjectives, or rather how to decline adjectives in the different cases, and also for gender and number. And then, you know, that's really easy. That's something that you should learn in A1 and A2. You should get this kind of base grammar down, yes. But then it goes on, at the end of every chapter is a reading section and then a writing section. The other exercises before that are really good to reinforce the rules that you just learned, for example, adjectives. And I think that you can do them at the A1, A2 levels, but the reading and the writing parts require you to write and form your own sentences. For example, they want you to write a 100-word like online survey answer about what kind of clothing you wear and why, and what did you wear the last time you went somewhere, what's the worst like clothing in your opinion, what's the best. And I think for A1 that is asking too much, and I think that it renders this writing section useless for the level that they're also trying to target. When I first picked up this book, I had pretty much a mid A1 level or so. I looked at this book, I tried the first few exercises, I was like, oh, this is not so bad. I was learning the grammar, and I couldn't do any of the real writing exercises, and I was very frustrated because I didn't really understand what the point of it was. And then so I recently just picked this book up again at B1-ish level, and now the writing tasks are fairly easy, and I've been writing a lot, at least I'm trying to, but my issue is that now I already know all of the grammar that they're trying to introduce in every chapter. I kind of just do it to get like a review again, but now it's like they're kind of talking to me like I'm a toddler, but also expecting me to kind of write my bachelor's thesis at the same time. So I think there's a very strange balance in these chapters, and that is my main problem with this book. I am so sorry if this turned into a really long rant, but I think it's very important to mention this. Maybe I should have made a full video just reviewing this book. Actually, I might do that. If anyone is interested in that, I will do that. Also, with any of the other books I mentioned, if you want to see a review, I will review it for you, so you know what you're spending your money on if you decide to get it. But yes, I can recommend this if you are an A2 learner trying to break through to B1, and also if you are a B1 learner who wants to review grammar again and get some writing practice. But I would not recommend this for anything below like a advanced beginner. They say advanced beginner, but then they're like, this chapter is for A1 to B2. Anyway, kind of a recommendation. And actually, I also mentioned last time Pushkin Online, or rather the online website of the Pushkin Institute, who, well, they have courses from A1 to C2, and they are all taught in completely Russian, no English. I tried their A2 course a little bit, and I think they did very well. I mean, I think it was useful. I don't think it should be your sole resource, but it's completely free. You can take a placement course that is also completely free beforehand, and then you can just go through the courses, pick up the interesting material that you see, and there's no harm in that. So I think that was it for grammar, besides any of the YouTube channels that I will mention in the next section. Yes, so now I'm going to be talking about YouTube channels. And first of all, I mentioned this earlier because I mentioned his podcast, but go check out the YouTube channel Russian with Max. He is amazing when it comes to beginner material. He speaks a bit more slowly than the usual native speaker, which is why I don't really use his videos anymore, which is kind of sad. I wish he would make some more advanced content, but he makes Russian videos with subtitles. He does grammar explanations. He does pretty much, well, he's doing pretty much anything you could ask for as a beginner. His content is interesting, and I think he is an amazing person. I can't believe he's doing all of this. I know he also offers paid memberships on his website, but he's putting all of this content onto YouTube for free, and I just think that is absolutely amazing. So next thing is, I think I did not mention this in my last video, it's Real Russian Club. I did not watch any of their grammar lessons, but they also do stuff like slow news in Russian where they're reading stuff to you. So go check that out. And number 3, Russian grammar. Once again, the Russian professor who does grammar explanations. It's going to be useful at pretty much any level. Well, maybe not super advanced, but I still watch some of his videos at some point. Like, I still watch some of his videos sometimes because I think they're amazingly made. So, how many times can I say go check it out in this video? I do not know, but it is too often. And then there's a channel that I found recently because she makes amazing intermediate grammar videos in all Russian, which I adore. But she also makes beginner content in English and also beginner listening in Russian with subtitles, I think. So that channel is called Amazing Russian. Please go check it out. I'm sorry, again. And I promise you that you will not regret it. What else? I'm trying to think. I guess the channels that I mentioned last time, Be Fluent in Russian, Boost Your Russian, and Easy Languages, because you will just see everyday like usage of the language and slang and all kinds of stuff with transcriptions and translations. What more could you possibly ask for? I do not know. What else? Yes, one of my last points, media. Last time I recommended you Yeralash, a children's sketch show, a comedy show. I still recommend that for A2. I still watch it sometimes. I think it's hilarious and can totally recommend it. The videos are super short, just bite-sized little fun children's videos. Alright. And again, Katyona Kwa imeni Kav, which is my favorite. But you should also just check out the Multifilm YouTube, where you can find just about any multica, and you can just kind of see if any of them fit your level, if you can understand, and you can just gain much more than just listening understanding or listening comprehension from that, because it's also just kind of a look inside of the like Soviet era culture, not just children's culture, but culture in general, because most of these comics are from the Soviet era. I think they're really good. I can completely, full-heartedly recommend this, and I will, again, link it below. Please feel free to head over there and just enjoy it. Hopefully you will enjoy it. And this brings us to the last part of this video. I feel like this video, it will be really long again. I am so sorry. I completely retract my statement that this will be a shorter video because I ranted about this book for so long. I'm sorry. But yes, this brings me to the last part of this video, which is just miscellaneous tips, as last time. Once again, Forbo for pronunciations and knowing how just words sound. 2. Russian gram for stress markings in any Russian text that you can copy and paste there, and then you will be able to read it out loud to yourself. It is very good and useful. Number 3. Conjugator, the online conjugation tool for verbs, adjectives, nouns, everything in tons of languages, and it's free. What more could you ask for? Yeah, so check these 3 resources out again. And now I have to look at what other tips I have this. What other tips did I write down for you guys? Oh, first of all, if you're not listening to Russian music yet, you are behind and you are missing out. I personally love Russian music. I've been listening to Russian music since last December, pretty much nonstop. It's the only music that I really listen to. If you need any recommendations, head over to my Twitter. I've been thinking about recommending a lot more Russian music on there. So yeah, there are a lot of grammar constructs that I just know from lyrics and that I can now flawlessly replicate in the spur of a moment situation where I just want to kind of say something real quick. I have this grammar in my head and I can use it. And that's just for music. So 100% recommend listening to a lot of music if you find something that you like. And then have a look into Russian prefixes, not just for nouns, but also for, well, verbs and partly for adjectives. Russian is a highly logical language when it comes to prefixes. They are really cool. Once you learn them, it's kind of like, you know, a bit of secret code. Like you can decode Russian words that you didn't really know beforehand. Okay, listen, I will give you one example. Okay, there is the Russian word opasность, which is like danger. Then the next word, безопасность, is like safety, security, because it's без is without, the opasность, danger. So without danger, safe. Which I just think that is really funny. You can kind of decode so many words like this. It's very enjoyable once you know it, and I will link you a website down below that you can use to learn a bit more about prefixes. I think it's very fun. I can recommend that. And another thing I mentioned last time, learn all your verbs in pairs if possible, of imperfective and perfective. Also learn imperfective and perfective, because that's one of the most central things to when it comes to verbs, and it's one of the things that haunts me every single day, that I wish I would have started doing earlier. And I think there was one more thing is you should learn the conjugations of some of the very base verbs, because a lot of verbs you will find with different prefixes meaning different things, but they will always be conjugated in the same way pretty much. So let's take, for example, the verbs davat and dat, which is to give. You will come across pretty early into studies, I would say, the verb pair продавать and продать, which is to sell. So if you already know dat and davat, then you automatically know how продавать and продать are conjugated, and you will have this every time you see a verb that has this verb as a suffix and a different prefix. And this is the case for many words. There are very many verbs that are kind of like a base, and then you add a prefix onto it and it becomes something completely different, or well, something related but with a different meaning. But they will pretty much in 95% of the cases always be conjugated the same. So once you learn this base stuff, you are set, and it is going to be so helpful when you see a verb that you've not seen before, because you again instantly know pretty much without fail how it is going to be conjugated. And those were really my main tips. And that brings me to the end of this video. I'm sorry that it got really long again. I hope that it was at least useful. I'm trying to make it useful. I'm trying to tell you what I did to reach the level that I am right now. And I will be making a B1 video also very soon, hopefully next week. And then the B2 C1 thing I'll space out a lot more. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please like and subscribe, and maybe comment if you have any kind of wish for me, like what kind of video I could make. And also go follow me on my Twitter if you're interested, because I'm very active there, and I also give advice and tips if you message me. So yes, that was it from me. Bye bye, and good luck in your Russian studies. See you. And this example is very Nein, 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 nein. Ich filme gerade. Was möchtest du?
Du könntest mir